Everyone knows pulling weeds is the worst part of gardening, but if I put in a few minutes every day, that'll save me from having to put in hours on the weekend. Most people ignore weeds until they take over, but one of the main problems is weeds tend to grow faster than your vegetables and other plants in your garden. The longer weeds sit in your garden, the deeper the roots get. The deeper the roots get, the harder it is to pull the weeds out of your garden. The harder it is to pull the weeds out of your garden, the more time you'll spend weeding. If you spend just a couple minutes every day, then you'll never have to fight the full-on weed war. One thing I like to do is to focus on one bed a day. That way, I can make my way through the entire garden throughout the week. Small weeds like these, they come out easily. But if I wait, the weeds end up stealing nutrients and water from my plants. Now, when it comes to pulling weeds, timing matters. And the best time to pull weeds from your garden is either right after it rains or right after you got finished watering your garden. And why is that? Well, wet soil equals looser roots. And if you're trying to weed your garden and it has dry soil, weeding when the soil is moist makes it 10 times easier to remove the weeds, especially if you live down here in Zone 9, because we already know when the summertime comes, our ground gets hard as clay. And that's one of the reasons why I do most of my weeding early in the morning. So right after the drip irrigation lines run, it's easier for me to come outside and remove the weeds. If you're pulling weeds daily, all you really need are your hands. But if you miss a few days, tools will make the job a lot easier. If you're a raised bed gardener like myself, all you really need is one of these. With this, I'm able to dig out the deep roots from the weeds and then smooth over the soil. If you don't have raised beds, then you can look into something like this, a hori-hori knife. With this hori-hori knife, I'm able to dig out the deep roots of weeds like dandelions with ease. If you don't have raised beds and you're an in-ground bed gardener, then you may want to look into something like this, a good old-fashioned hoe. Now, there's different types of hoes, so make sure you get the one that works best for what it is you're doing. And that's one thing I love about tools. Tools allow you to work smarter, not harder. And don't forget, this series here is about creating an effective and efficient routine that allows us to spend a minimal amount of time in our garden, but also ensure that we have a thriving garden. So, tools, So, the right tools for the job will help you spend less time weeding. But truthfully, you want to know what's better than weeding? Not having to weed at all. And the easiest way to minimize the amount of time that you're going to have to spend pulling weeds in your garden is by placing a thick layer of organic mulch on top of your garden beds. Now, mulch isn't just for raised garden beds. You want to make sure that you're mulching everywhere in your garden. So that means around the base of our fruit trees, in our perennial patch, and anywhere else we have in-ground garden beds. You see, a thick layer of organic mulch helps block the sunlight from hitting the soil. And no sunlight means minimal weeds in your garden bed. If you want to learn about all of the other benefits of adding mulch to your garden bed, then make sure you check out this episode right here. And that's it. By spending a few minutes weeding your garden daily, it'll prevent you from having to put in those hour-long weeding sessions whenever you don't have the time. And don't forget, the less time we spend weeding, the more time we can spend enjoying our garden. Don't forget, the goal is to create an efficient routine that allows us to minimize the amount of work that we're doing in our garden and maximize the produce that we get out. That's it for today. Make sure you check out tomorrow where we're going to talk about watering the garden to make sure nothing is ever overwatered or underwatered.